Is it on?
Yeah, it's on.
All right.
It's recording. It's
Yeah.
recording. So, what's going on, bro? Broski, man, like.
Nah, it's good to be here, man.
Yeah,
You know, Freetown once a year, Christmas.
have to. You know, I was explaining it to someone recently that this is my sabbatical. It's like 1 month of the year, pretty much, where I disappear and shut down for a little bit just to relax because the years can be yearing sometimes. And I was saying to you earlier on that we're doing a retreat here at Hotel Balmoy, and the whole idea is to teach the techniques and to actually have the experimental transformation of the difference between taking rest and having actual recovery. All right, so most of the times people go on holiday or something, take some time off for a couple of weeks, come back and they're right back to square one.
Well, you need a holiday from the holiday, man.
Holiday from the holiday, exactly. I saw a post this morning actually about that and said, no, that they even want Sundays to be 48 hours instead of 24, just so they can have a little bit of a buffer before they go back. But that's only because there's no recovery that's done and there's actual things to help that. So the retreat is all about that. But we had a conversation this morning and I wanted to cover some of that because we covered some really great points.
Yeah.
What kind of things would you want to know about the burnout journey?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think actually identifying when is anyone at risk of experiencing burnout.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the risk part is significant as well because there's 12 stages of burnout, and as I always say to people, the first 3 looks like high performance, like you're really doing really well, you're doing a lot of productivity, you're accepting more work, etc. And so in terms of the workplace, for example, you can look like the perfect employee,
Yeah.
right? But I guess when it becomes a risk is when things start to crack. So the productivity isn't as good and you start forgetting things, or you start having physical, mental, emotional changes. You start to snap at people in a way that you don't usually. There's usually signs, really. And one of the things I was saying to you before is because a lot of the people who I work with have experienced burnout before, it's a lot easier to identify what those signs are because they're unique to everybody. Some people go into emotional exhaustion, for example, right? And that might look like they can't feel anything anymore, you know. But some people go through emotional exhaustion, which is the complete opposite, which is that they get highly emotional all the time and everything triggers them. Both of them are signified as, you know, red flags, should we say, that something is going wrong. So the main thing is to just identify, okay, what is starting to go wrong here? What am I losing control of? And what are the changes? Those are the things that I'd say is when you start to be at risk. Because until then, it can often just be pressure that we all experience. But it's when that pressure gets enough for us to break, that's when it becomes a problem.
And I think when you talked about the 12 stages, one of the things I was interested to just understand a little bit more is, you think back through all the people that you've spoken to over the last couple of years, however long it's been, you think about the distribution of where those people are throughout those stages, where they are in the curve. What does that distribution look like?
Yeah, it's funny because, as I was saying earlier, you have the 12 stages of burnout, right? And burnout in a clinical sense only really happens at the very end, and there's a lot of things that happen before you get to that stage. But there's a cycle of burnout that usually occurs. So you'll be fine. You have increased workload, for example. You reach a point where you get to your limit, or usually people try and push through their limit, and then something breaks. And then you start to see all the symptoms, etc., and start to fall into this cascading emotional, physical, mental, behavioral changes until you reach burnout, which is often more than 3 months down the line of consistent, unmanaged stress. And then at that point, you hit rock bottom. And that's the point where people start to put in practices to get them out of burnout. But then the problem is once they feel better again, they stop doing the practices. And so and they start thinking, oh, I'm okay, I can take on more work, I can do da, and then the cycle repeats itself. So for me, what I've realized is that most of the clients I've seen are the people who've gone through burnout before, or at least brushed up against it. And so they know what the risk is, because it's really actually difficult, I'm realizing, to explain what burnout looks like and what the impact is for someone who's never experienced it. Because for them, it's just stress or just pressure. But for someone who's actually experienced it, they're like, okay, I don't want that again. And they can often quantify it, they can qualify it as well. So they would have gone through the cycle already, and at the point where they can feel the stress coming on again, and they don't want to fall back into that cycle. So that's the point where I really, most of the clients right now tend to be.
And when you think about, articulating the impact, so what are the risks of not addressing it? What are the costs of the problem continuing? How do you think about quantifying that, the real benefit of it, making it a no-brainer choice when someone's at that point where they're looking for a solution?
Yeah, and you know, effectively, it's easier to quantify with people who've done it already, because you can use experiences that they've had. So that might look like, okay, their performance drops, and so they might lose their job. They might not get that promotion. They might have a breakdown in communication within their team and lose a client. They might, end up snapping and finding themselves in HR, or they might have emotional health issues, which means they have to take time off work. They have to be signed off for 3, 6, 9, 12 months even to be able to recover, which means that they might lose out on opportunities. They might, there are all kinds of things that can happen as a result of burnout, where I don't think they talk about it enough so that people realize. Because what often happens is, if you don't get to that stage, you don't recognize that it's connected to burnout. And if you get to the stage where you're kind of like, oh, this is just pressure, but I can handle it, you might be experiencing the symptoms, but have normalized them already, which means that you think it's just the way it should be. Like, for example, if you're in a law firm, if you're in finance, if you're in healthcare, often we normalize a certain level of stress, which is actually too much for the body to be handling on prolonged periods of time. But what that means is everyone gets burnt out, and then it's considered part of the culture of the work, when it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, man. You know what? Obviously, spending years in consulting, I've definitely seen different proliferations and manifestations of that as well. One of my older colleagues, she ended up being written off sick, so just spending, I don't even know how many weeks off as a result. And I wonder what were some of the preemptive things that she might have been able to do, or some of the things that she might have been able to see before it got to that stage.
And that's the bit that's different for everybody, because everyone's built different. Right? And an example I would give is that, I guess, to understand it, you have to understand what stress is first. At a very basic level, stress itself isn't a bad thing. Stress, it gets you focused, it gets you alert, it gets you into that state where you can do a task, for example, whether it's a deadline, whether it's work, whether it's building a business, whatever it is, right? The problem is when it's too much stress in the body, which is like cortisol and adrenaline, and it actually becomes toxic within the body when it's not released. And so it's not necessarily having stress in the body, it's not releasing it that is more of the problem over time, because it means you're constantly at a state of high alert for prolonged periods of time. So if you're able to complete the stress cycle, which looks like, okay, you're at rest at one stage, you identify there's something which is pressure or a deadline or something like that you need to do, you become highly stressed, so you get focus mode, you put the energy into use by doing the thing, and then after the thing is complete, you're meant to have a recovery stage where it goes back to stage one, which is where you're at rest again. That last stage doesn't happen sometimes, right? So because we finished the thing and then we're on to the next thing already. And you talk about consulting or building businesses or anything like that, there's always something to do. So you don't give your body the even the idea that something has completed. It's like, okay, cool, we won this bid, there's another bid tomorrow. and you don't like in the wild, you would have, you know, build a campfire and, you know, eaten the winds of the field or something like that. You would have cooked the harvest. You would have celebrated or partied or something like that. Nowadays, we don't do any of that. It's the moment you finish something, you just go on to the next one. One of my favorite quotes is, "Be careful not to reward climbing a mountain with another mountain." And that's what we tend to do. You finish one, you go on to the other, and it doesn't give that chance. So in terms of your colleague, what she can do is really closing that stress loop. And that can look like, sometimes it's something as simple as crying. Sometimes it's something as simple as going to a party or something like that. It can be having time off. It can be reading or reframing, which is one of my favorite things, is reflecting over what has caused you stress and how we can do it again better next time in a way that doesn't apply so much stress. It can be about venting. It can be self-care, like, you know, going to a spa or anything like that. I was talking to you earlier on, a lot of people take up things like running, which is really good because stress, the cortisol and adrenaline need somewhere to go, which is why you feel better after going for a run for two reasons. One, it gives that energy somewhere to go, as in release, which it needs, but then also it clears the mind. And so it actually gives your mind chance to reset. Like, I know some people really struggle with shutting off after work, for example. It's things like fitness, things like having some buffer between work and home can be really good for that, to separate, because otherwise it blends into one constant field of stress, and you can't see the difference between your personal or professional stress. So it's just stress during the day, stress during the night, and then you wake up already stressed because it hasn't released in the night either, because you're probably thinking about that work you've got to do, you're thinking about the deadline, you're not sleeping well. All of those kind of things can fall into each other to make it even worse.
Yeah, that reminds me of the analogy we were talking about earlier with balancing the load when you're doing exercise and ending up with joint pains if it's not balanced properly. I want to come back to that because I found that powerful.
Yeah.
I think before that, I want to get to the revenue.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to get to the
talk
revenue.
me,
I want to
talk
get
me.
to the model. So
Yes.
look, we just talked about some serious quantifiable impacts, right? We're talking about a loss of salary, a loss of bonus, a loss of additional incremental salary from a promotion. These are serious, hard costs, let alone harder to quantify costs around, risks, how you're actually feeling day to day, how you end up showing up for your family as a result. So how do you even think about pricing something of that, of that level of risk, of that level of value? How do you approach pricing that?
Yeah, do you know what? I think a good place to start, because I'm working with predominantly people who've experienced it in some kind of way before, who don't want to go back into it. One place I start is, what does it cost you the last time you were here? What did it cost you? Is it that it cost you your job? Is it that it cost you your relationships, your health? What was it? And how much money did you spend trying to fix it before? Is it that you had to take time off? Was it unpaid leave? Did you have to take a sabbatical? Did you have to go private medical insurance or any of those kind of things to do? What was there? Medication? Was there trips you went to? Was there retreats? Was there coaching? Was there therapy? Was there any of those kind of things that you tried to do, to apply to be able to relieve yourself of these stresses? And those are really good places I found to start in terms of quantifying it, because otherwise it can be just like, you're just testing out the air really with nothing to go with. Because at that point you realize how valuable it actually is. And there's a process of doing that. Like I said, asking those questions and actually going through it and getting them to think. Because I think at the time, if you don't necessarily correlate all the things that are going wrong with stress, then you can just think it's just life. Once you realize it's stress and you realize there's something you can do about it, then you can say, actually, there was another approach to all of this, because I spent all this money, came back, and I was stressed again. So whatever I did didn't work. And often the people who I work with have tried something and it hasn't been successful. They haven't been able to sustainably keep out of this loop that keeps falling into this burnout state. So quantifying it based on the past, And then it's looking at, okay, what is this value to you? You mentioned it just before, is there's the risk, but there's also the reward, like this experience. What is the price you would give to be able to handle stress in a way that doesn't affect your nervous system? Like what was the quality of life if you're able to manage the pressures of work and be able to go home and still be the person that you want to be for your family?
And I think conceptually it makes sense, of course. But let's get specific. So if I'm coming to you today and I'm saying to you, I've already had an issue that's potentially caused me to take some time off work. So I know that it's something that could become incapacitating. I haven't necessarily spent to try and solve it. I haven't been to a therapist yet. What actually am I going to get by working with you, and how much is it going to set me back?
Well, working with me is usually a process. Depending on at what point you would join with me, it might actually look like a particular session. Maybe you join in at a workshop. Maybe you there's a live event that I'm doing, and you get to get a taste of my approach. Because my approach.
I think we should do that again.
No,
that's the important bit, isn't
it? Yeah.
Just because you think that would have been quite.
My guy's projecting.
Yeah, trust me, he's still
from the diaphragm.
So I'll start with the question again.
Yeah, no
worries. So let's say, and again, conceptually it makes sense, but practically, let's say I'm coming to you now. I've already had a problem as a result. Let's say I've had to take time off work, or I've already identified this as something that could be incapacitating for me, and I'm coming to you now for a solution.
Yeah.
What's it going to be like to work with you, and how much is it going to set me back?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on what point you join in. It might be that you see me online, you join my school platform, and you've seen the discussions and you've seen how I communicate with those. There's a certain level of that which is completely free, which is more about the community, because one of the things that we find is that if you're going through stress and burnout, often what people do is isolate, and which disconnects them from people, which is actually what you need in that time. So the school platform allows you that connection with other people who have experienced it, which means that you don't have to put on a mask, right? There's another level which is more of the education, the courses, etc., which is actually, think about it now, because I haven't decided how much these things cost yet. But I'm going to throw some numbers out.
Yeah, I mean, because But I'd give a range.
Okay, got you.
Give a range. Yeah.
So with the education level, which is the main tier, then that is between 50 to 100 a month, right? And that gives access to all the live events, which might be online or in person. There's a library of tools, kits, etc., that would help you in terms of reframing, in terms of recovery, in terms of rebuilding, and also any pop-up events that happen, right? And then the tier above that, which is somewhere between the 150 to 250 mark, is more of the coaching. So that's the group coaching one, where you sit with each week, you'll sat with other people who've experienced it. And the good thing about group coaching, because I know we had a conversation about the difference between the benefits of group versus one-to-one. Group coaching is good because it allows you to see how other people are experiencing the same thing you're experiencing. And what you'll find is one person might have a question, and by helping that one person, everybody gets to see how you can approach it. And the good thing about that is other people can give in their lived experience as well. So let's say, for example, we've got a group of 8 of us here. Your specific need is about how to handle the pressure of work in a highly stressful sector, but also manage the home life, right? I will be coaching you, and there'll be nuggets that come up with that, but then it also opens up for the room for them to add in their experience and what works for them, so that you have more tools.
By the way, is it going to be, so because you mentioned like cutting it in half, by the way, like the screen in half. So are you going to be able to like make a cut of a video and it's just your face,
Yeah.
and same this way as well.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So you can do like portrait, and so I'll take a cut which is just this for me, and a cut which is that.
So maybe I'll move back a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So where do I get up to?
You got up to the process. You got up to the process for working with you.
Yes. Okay. So those are the 3 tiers, and then after that, so yeah, I was talking about group coaching, the difference between that and one-to-one. So group coaching, you get to have the group, and they all put in. One-to-one is different because it means that we are completely dedicated to your particular challenge, which has my attention one-to-one. So it's more expensive, and so there are 2 things. There's this Ascend program, which has a mixture of 2, and that's the highest ticket program, but you kind of need to go through some of the other stages first before it gets there. You get to see how we work with each other, because one of the things that's challenging about burnout is you can chat GPT all the stuff you need to do. You know, you can Google it, you can read all the books. The challenge isn't the information, it's the implementation. And that's where the problems really start. It's how do I make it a discipline? How do I make it a ritual that these things that keep me out of burnout don't fall apart once the pressure comes? Which is why, as great as it is to have a workshop or a standalone session with me, to actually have a recovery process, you'll need more of a program, because life happens, right? You learn a tool today, tomorrow you're facing redundancy. You have to apply that now, and there'll be some things that work, some things that don't, and you need a space to be able to go back and forth and say, oh, actually, this is working, this isn't, let's tweak it based on me, right? And then the challenge is, once you start doing these things, it's how to keep it so it's part of your lifestyle, so that those things that got you into a burnout state don't come back. I know you were talking about your recovery as well with your knee, right?
Yeah, well, I was just even before that as well. I was just thinking about the concept of how important it is to get execution right.
Yeah.
Because you can throw templates, tools, guidance, any kind of toolkit, and you can put it all online. You can bunch it up in a nice little folder, distribute it, and people won't do it.
Yeah, that's true.
They won't do it.
Yeah.
They won't do it. So,
and think about it this way, especially if they're burnt out. So if you're actually burnt out, you're at the end of your rope already. You don't have the energy. Even clearing your room might feel like too much. You haven't done the dishes in ages. Your appearance is starting to get disheveled because you think, what's the point? Like I said to you earlier on, there's like 3 elements of burnout. There's emotional exhaustion, there's depersonalization, which is where you become detached from yourself and other people and things. And then you have reduced sense of personal accomplishment, which is like, what's the point? You become very cynical and lose hope. And when you're actually at those stages, are you going to now do like a course or like follow a self-guided program? Probably not. Even turning it on is going to be a challenge. So that's why you need a space that's created, which is going to check in with you without actually the pressure. Because even with the school platform, one of the things I'm realizing at the moment is we just need a space where people don't have to do those things. You just need to be there, right? And then slowly but surely, you start to regain the energy at your own pace. And so I'll be there to guide them through it on a one-to-one case. And it's really important, actually, because even I said before, I had a client, and there was one particular session we had where I knew that they had a huge deadline coming up, and I knew they were starting to get stressed. And then I stopped hearing from them. It's like the whole point of having these sessions is because you need help with the stress around this thing. So, and the analogy I always give is drowning, right? When you're drowning, you're not thinking about your 5-year plan. You're thinking about how you can get air right now. And stress has that effect. It makes you think short term. So if you're under stress, you're thinking, how can I, do this task? How can I do this thing? You're not necessarily thinking to yourself, okay, I need to actually maintain my sleep. I need to maintain my nutrition, my hygiene. I need to maintain my mindset. I need to keep, interacting with people who bring me joy. I need to keep doing these things that are fun, so I have release. All these things you're going to throw away if you don't have some kind of system that helps you maintain that as part of your go-to. It's like the difference between game theory and infinite game. Game theory is how to play to win. Infinite game is how to play to keep the game going. So how can you make it so that these things become part of your system that is difficult to be broken, so that when stuff happens, what do they say? You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your systems. If it's something that you always do and you're naturally doing, then you're more likely to keep doing it when things go wrong.
Yeah, and it's coming from an economics undergrad, so that game theory analogy resonated for sure.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, I guess, even zooming out a little bit. So when you describe the proposition to me, it's clear that it's a very specific problem for a really specific person at a really specific moment in time, right? So it's really targeted for people who have experienced this issue and that problem before, and or almost in the place where they're actually starting to either spend or to look for a solution. So when you think about your go-to-market, how do you kind of attract and connect with those people so that you can help them? What's the process for acquiring those clients?
Yeah, a lot of it is messaging. Exactly what you said right there. I'm having to be a lot clearer now that I'm a lot clearer about who it is, because before I was just a coach, and then I realized that a lot of the clients came with this specific challenge, so I became more focused on burnout. And then I realized that actually it's more prevention, because there's a difference between prevention and recovery. So, but prevention of someone who has recovered before came later as well, because then it's like, actually we have a toolkit to use, because like I said earlier, if you've never experienced it, you don't know the tangible element of it. So when it comes to the messaging, that's what I'm finding to be the really important bit. Mainly LinkedIn, joining in conversations that are already happening, because what I'm realizing is there's a lot of people talking about burnout, and a lot of the information is just not accurate or not holistic. So it's like, okay, cool, I see a video of someone talking about the ritual of just wait a second. My G's. Superstar. How you doing, sir? Yeah. So, well,
Go-to-market method, acquiring clients.
Yeah. So with the messaging, that's one step. And then it's things like LinkedIn and having conversations that are already happening, because a lot of people are using either inaccurate or incomplete information. So, okay, yes, doing your runs, taking a spa day are great, but there's a difference between rest and recovery, for example, right? And if your goal is to recover from stress, then those things by themselves may not actually help. So that's why you keep having to do the runs, you keep having to take time off, you keep having to take time off after the holiday, because you haven't done the recovery part. So I'll be going into these conversations and just adding a little bit of information and saying, this is great, but also think about this. And usually that starts a conversation within the DMs. And then there's events, monthly events, live events that I'm doing within the school platform, which allows us to, as a group, I use them as a workshop. So there'll be an element of it which I teach, and then an element of it which we go into groups, we discuss, we come out of them and share. And that tends to build community as well, because again, what I was saying before about burnout being quite isolating, it helps with regards to that. And then it's just having conversations that lead towards a package or a program if it's something that they need further support with. Because, like I said, often that person would have tried a lot already and they're fed up. So they're looking for someone has specified information, specified. Why do I feel like this is going to fall over? Someone who has specific knowledge in that area who can actually help them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you think about the entire market as well, so how many people, from your estimations, are suffering from that problem at that point in their life right now today?
Well, that's the thing. There's lots of research that supports it being somewhere between 50 to 60%, I'd say, in some kind of way, shape, or form. So, for
50 to 60%?
Yeah. So, for example, in the teaching profession, in education, I can't remember what the actual figure was, but it's somewhere between 45 and 55% of teachers are leaving the profession without coming back to the teaching industry because of the amount of stress, because they've been burnt out, etc. Usually, when it comes up to those numbers between 50 to 70%, it's people who are showing signs of burnout, who are not necessarily burnt out yet, but they're definitely seeing the physical, mental, emotional, behavioral changes that signify that burnout is coming on, which means that they have to take more time off and they get medically signed off, for example, for a period of time.
Sorry, hold on.
Yeah.
Are we talking about 50 to 70% of that entire working population, or are you talking about 50 to 70% of the ones who have already quit?
As having experienced burnout?
Yeah.
No. I would say unmanaged stress. Let's say it that way.
Yeah.
So there's lots of surveys that have gone out to research this level of stress that is a problem. So out of the general working population, 50 to 70% have experienced what can lead to burnout.
Right, okay, got you.
Right? So that means that they might be on level 4 or 5 out of 12 stages of burnout. They might have experienced some like emotional depletion. They might have experienced weight gain and weight loss as a result of stress. And they might, because if you think about it, stress is the source of so many problems. It can inflame. These people are coming back in it. So if you imagine that 50 to 70% have experienced maybe up to stage 8, for example, of the 12 stages of burnout, they would have experienced the physical, mental, emotional changes, the behavioral changes. They would have had to take time off. They would have shown signs that they are burning out, as opposed to necessarily having burnt out already.
Got you. Because the reason I ask is because, to me, immediately, you say that kind of description in terms of the signifiers of who might be affected. You're looking at tens of millions of people, really, realistically, easily, globally.
Yeah.
And I think traditionally what people would normally do there is to kind of just say, okay, what are some of the most stressful professions? What are some of the most stressful companies? Maybe they make a list of companies, go onto one of these tools and just start filtering on the companies, right? So they'll say, oh, I know this bank and this consultancy is going to have people who are likely to be stressed. Filter on big companies, let's say, 1,000+ employees. Maybe they've done some funding or they've raised some money, so they're likely to have a budget to, corporate wellness budget or something like that that you can tap into. And I think what you're saying is interesting because you're looking at kind of redesigning that go-to-market flow to focus less on the big firmographics. Where is the company? You know, how big is it? What's the employee size? To actually start to almost reverse engineer it down to the actual, you know, the workers and colleagues themselves. So rather than just look at a company and what are some of the firmographics of that company, start to think what actually are some of the signifiers at individual level that someone might be having a problem.
Yeah.
And I think when we talked about it before, you know, I think we talked about finding people who are posting certain keywords. Right?
Yes.
Are they posting about burnout? Are they posting about stress?
Yeah.
Whether that's Reddit or LinkedIn. Once you got that, you got their contact details. You know, reach out. Like what you said, man, you can reach out.
Yeah.
Message, email, one-to-one.
100%.
I just think the data says you're always going to convert higher than just looking at a static company and trying to figure out within that company who might be affected. Right? If you can get to the source and the heart of people who are already in market talking about the problem, there's a million ways to get their contact details nowadays. I think it's a no-brainer that it's gonna land.
And it was actually you who pointed out Reddit as well.
Yes,
That's a space where people are just saying exactly what they feel.
Yeah. No filter.
No filter at all. And you get to see what people are really thinking and really feeling, and in their words as well. But just to give, like, because I think what you said was really important in terms of talking about the individual. But there's often signs on the corporate side as well, which is kind of like a nuanced thing. Rate of turnover, absenteeism, how much sick leave are people taking, is there a drop in performance, is there, you know, how many HR visits does someone have to take? Usually there's some kind of insurance package for well-being, so how many people are actually using it? You know, obviously because of GDPR and everything, they won't be able to tell you everything, but if there is saying, okay, there is actually 40 or 50% of our staff are accessing this particular thing, it means that it may not be a problem with the individual. It may be a problem with the actual company itself. Like maybe there's something where in the processes it's leaving too much pressure for the people who aren't qualified to take it on. Maybe there needs to be some kind of systemic audit as well. So there's different levels of it depending on what level we look at, because often one of the questions I asked when I have some interviews I've done for the podcast is, in what ways has stress or burnout shown up which wasn't called stress or burnout? And that gets the person thinking about, actually, now I know what stress and burnout looks like. What have been the signs that I haven't been paying attention to, which I've maybe called something else? High performance, or being a giver, you know, or being mother hen I've heard that term used. You know, there's usually someone in the team who looks after everybody, but then what happens when that person can't do that role anymore, or something happens to them and they don't feel like they can share the burden with anyone else in the group, and then suddenly that person disappears off the face of the planet, and they don't know why or when. You know, one of the problems I've seen in some companies is that idea of a lot of these problems being a surprise. You know, this person who's the high flyer all of a sudden just stops. And they're like, what happened? Well, actually, the signs have been there if you've been paying attention. They never said no. They take on too much. They take on the roles of people who are meant to be part of the team. You know, they are, you know, constantly staying behind unnecessarily. They seem to be pushing themselves beyond their limits. All these things happen, and there might not be the psychological safety for that person to actually express why those habits are happening, because they feel like that might keep them in their employment, you know? So there is the individual level, but there's also the systemic level within the company, which can be a difficult conversation to have with a company, right? You know, I've had situations where I've had to say, okay, we're doing this project with you, and they've specifically asked us not to use the word burnout because they don't want it to make it look like they're causing the burnout.
End up with a whole slew of lawsuits.
Exactly, right? So like things like that have been really interesting, having to maneuver that.
And I think some of that's interesting, right? Because it depends where you're at in the discovery. So one of the things you said there is, you know, understanding what is the extent to which you know, they've had to reserve funding to solve this problem already? Have they had insurance claims
Yeah.
or compliance fines, all those sorts of issues? But one of the things that you said as a signal is interesting there is, have they actually got high staff turnover already?
Yes.
Have they got high attrition? Are they struggling to retain their employees and colleagues? Because that information is there available,
Yeah.
right? So you could use the AI and just
Yeah.
say, look, find me, relatively decent sized companies in these areas that have a high attrition problem right now. Most of their colleagues are leaving. As you say, that's probably one of the biggest identifiers you could see in terms of, potentially they've got a problem in managing stress, or it's a stressful environment.
Yeah.
So why not start there as, as companies to target, colleagues to talk to? Makes a lot of
100%.
sense.
And I've definitely been doing that, and that's a really good approach to get an idea of which company is actually in trouble. But then there's also things like news reports. So is there a merger going on? Is there a business which is like on the verge of collapse? Is there redundancies? Are there things like that happening within the company? And often this is actually publicly listed information. So you can say to your ChatGPT, these are the signals that I'm looking for. Have a look at these and find me the best companies that I can work with of this size. And then it's about actually approaching that. And what I found is who to approach within the company can sometimes be a bit of a challenge as well. So is it the director or the manager? Is it the finance person because they're the sign off on the cost? Or is it, so that part is slightly different depending on the organization or the company. But often it starts with a conversation. Hey, look, I've noticed this has been happening. This is what I've seen happen at other companies and how I've helped. Like, I would love to have a conversation with you if it would help you guys. Usually it will happen as maybe like a half an hour Zoom call where they tell me a little bit more about what's going on. I ask them some questions about, have you thought about this, or what have you done about this issue? And hello, my sister. How are you? I would have asked those questions like, you're experiencing this, have you tried this? How have you approached this issue? And then if it's something where they say, okay, actually this person knows what he's talking about, I can actually use this help. Then I say, okay, cool. Often I usually give like one little tidbit of information, something they can actually apply immediately and see some kind of result. But then it'd be, okay, let's have an actual discovery call then, to see what working with us might look like. And then it will look at, okay, then it comes to the packages, etc. Because sometimes it might be something relatively small, but if it's something like a retention issue, that's going to take a little bit more time. So then it might be like a 3, 6, 9 month package, because you're not going to do one workshop and expect everything to change, which people have actually done though, because they're like, okay, we did this workshop and there's still a problem.
Where's the results?
Exactly.
Where's the results?
You expect that to happen with one workshop.
Yeah.
This is a problem that's taken how many years to build up, and now you want this to be over within an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So there's also managing the expectations of that as well, and being like, this is what we can achieve in this amount of time. What is the root of the problem you're experiencing? What is the one that, if we could fix that, will make everything else a little bit more accessible? And then I'll put together a package that goes for that within their budget as much as possible. But if it's something where one of the challenges we've had is just like, okay, they say no, fair enough, not everyone is going to work with me, that's fine. But then they go find someone cheaper, and then they get what they paid for, and then they come back and the problem is worse because they've tried something and now they've completely destroyed the trust amongst the employees. And so now I have even more work to do to rebuild it, because now the employees see that this is just a company that throws money without really caring about us, and which makes my job a lot harder the second time around. Exactly.
Yeah, it makes sense, man.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
That's it. Yeah, man.
And look, to be honest, even this year alone, I've spoken to over 70 different businesses of different sizes and scales facing that similar problem of figuring out how to go to market. And I'll tell you, the ones who are absolutely smashing it, they're focusing on specific problems and content. So they're not just blasting out huge campaigns to any type of business or any big business in the UK or US. They're doubling down on content that will really speak to those problems. So they're out on LinkedIn or they're out on Twitter. They've got some sort of founder or someone who's in the leadership team who actually gets it,
Yeah.
and who's creating their own content themselves. And then they're looking for signals that we talked about, right? One of the ones that I absolutely love is using the AI to understand who are the people who are already interacting with this of my own content, right? So pulling that information and effectively, so they're effectively using the AI to scrape that information and figure out, okay, who are the people who are already interacting with that, whether that's on my page or someone else's page. Enriching that list of contacts with other details, whether it's LinkedIn, email, phone, and all of a sudden, you might have a smaller list. You might have a list of a few hundred people who are really today actively facing that problem right now. Of course, you're going to absolutely smash it when you only focus on lists of that size with that level of pain and urgency.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer, but it takes time, and it takes setting up a process that you can actually do that, right?
Yeah.
Tooling, tech, building the right list, contacting the right people with a message that works.
Yeah.
You can go to the moon.
That's the idea. I'll meet you there, bro. Definitely, man.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember, was there anything else?
These are good, by the way. I think this is really, really helpful.
Oh yeah, we should talk. One more thing is it still going?
Yeah.
And because there's going to be people out there who are kind of saying, it sounds cool, but is this bro science, or is it really kind of evidence backed?
Yeah.
How much of this is just using personal experiences to try and figure out what to do next? How much of this is actually based and rooted in scientific facts? Right? I'd imagine there's a blend, but yeah, talk to me about what that blend looks like for you.
Yeah, well, my co-founder is a medical doctor, so that's her approach with everything, Luna Chizo, and she is incredible, basically. And for me, it's been really helpful having someone like that on the team, because her approach is, what's the evidence for this? Is it peer researched? Is it evidence-based? Is there something where if there's a legal suit to come after it, we can prove it with the reasoning of why we chose this instead of that? There is a lot of research out there at the moment. One thing that is important to note, though, is that burnout as a medical condition isn't diagnosable. So you can't necessarily, sometimes people are looking for an official diagnosis. Technically, they can't do that because it's not listed as one of those, but it's registered, it's under ICD-11, International Center of Diseases 11th issue, as a condition. So there are symbols, there are signs, there are impacts, there are proven strategies to help recover from it. Hello? Ryan, say something?
Hello?
Okay. Yeah, so you're talking about evidence-based.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I said, ICD-11, there's a lot of research around it at the moment. It's been around since the 30s, and it's around since the 70s. as a term, but now there's been a lot of books, there's a lot of research, it's registered a lot within psychotherapy. No, I think it's okay.
American as well.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of research on the impact of burnout on performance, on health, on what burnout actually is, and it's actually readily available nowadays. You can find it pretty much anywhere. It's just a matter of knowing where to look. One of the things I found really interesting is that you've got a lot of books, right?
You know what? Let me just go to the toilet while she's shouting.
There's a toilet in here on the right. Do you want to leave the mic?
Can you just pause it, come?
Yeah, but I mean, because it disconnect and then reconnect. Alright, cool. Yeah.
How is it?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Golden hour.
Golden hour, man. What? Maybe one last question.
You know what? Actually, I'm gonna ask this. This is gonna be slightly more sensational, but
Sensational. I like it.
Or sensationalized, I should say.
Okay, let's go.
But I want to hear more. So, one of the things that you described earlier was having a slightly different approach to problems, solving problems versus your co-founder or with your co-founder. I should say. So, I've always had the belief that the best performing teams have balance in terms of different co-founders offering different skills.
Yeah.
And this is oddly contrarian nowadays because often you're hearing people say, you know, the best teams are just all a bunch of technical people or whatever. But I don't agree with that, and I never say never, but it's unlikely I'm going to get to a place where I agree with it. You've mentioned there that you have co-founded and partnered with, you know, a qualified doctor in order to bring that evidence-based, factual discovery and research to your solutions.
Yeah.
How does that tension manifest when you're a creative, you're an innovator, you want to do things differently and you want to push the boundaries of doing things that have not been done before and have not always necessarily been proven or ready to work? I imagine that's going to create a healthy tension and conflict.
A healthy tension and conflict is a good way to put it. That's exactly what it is. And we've actually had that. Like, there's one time in particular where we had a discussion
Mm.
about that. But it was necessary to happen because we found a middle ground that made it better for us both. And the way I would put it is, I like creativity, fluid, to be able to walk into a room, get a sense of what's happening in the space, what the needs are. And because I've been doing this for so long, I'm able to curate an experience for them pretty much on the spot, right? As a medical doctor, this is not how it happens, right? From the other perspective, there needs to be structure, there needs to be research, there needs to be all these things that are in place. And at first, I felt like this was something that would stifle the creativity in it, because if we're only going to be doing what has been done, then we'll never be able to do what hasn't. And so I was really resisting this idea until I realized that actually it's just about confidence in what we're doing. If that is what the case is, then we can use it as an opportunity, right? So there are certain things where you can read the books, you can read the research papers, etc. And a lot of what we're doing is based off that, especially the research-based, anything to do with the body, the mind, the spirit, how to regulate, how to reset your nervous system, your amygdala, all these kind of things are science-based. So we're keeping that in mind when we're creating new approaches. But when it comes to actually delivery, maybe it's something where if we're doing this for the first time and we don't know if it will work, to be honest with you, either we can bring in the client and say, listen, this is experimental research effectively that we're doing, and we'd like to do it with you. And usually we'd say maybe about 10 to 15 clients that we'd try this with to be able to get some kind of data to support it. And then we can do a larger scale if we start to see a trend of it working, to make it something that maybe we can write papers about and contribute to the evidence base that other people might use after us, right? So that's kind of how we're the middle ground that we found right now. Most of the stuff we do is seated within the evidence-based category, because there's something directly we can point to that shows that it works. But on the times when we don't, we use it as a research project to see if we can push the boundaries of something, because that's where the innovation grows. I'll give you an example. One of my favorite exercises is called the forum theater approach. And initially, forum theater is, you have a play, you have a show, and you have the actors who actually deliver this performance. But the audience is free to put their hand up and say a different version of how the scene might go. It's like, okay, cool, this happened, but what happens if they don't agree? And then that person will come in and take the place of the actor and deliver it as if that person doesn't agree. So you can see an alternative way to that scene. The way I'm using it within the coaching and the programs that we use is that if you have a team who are going through a conflict, for example, that's causing stress, maybe a conversation that hasn't happened, maybe there's imbalance within, you talked about the team working together within their strengths and everything, maybe there's an imbalance there. You can say, okay, how does this show up on an average day, for example, or a project? Where in the project does it show up? Okay, we've identified it happens when we're doing the actual delivery. Okay, give me an example of a scene where this has happened. We actually act it out. And then we say, how can we do this differently? And so the rest of the team, for example, might put their hand up and say, actually, maybe if it's a conflict, maybe we can do it in such a way that we open this with something that gives us more psychological safety. Like we actually say, hey, listen, I think I love what you did here, and I want this to continue. And I want to know how we can do it in light of so much change that is happening at the moment, as opposed to how is this going to fit in here, right? So we can actually try and test on the ground with the people who are actually experiencing it. And what happens then, going to because one of the things that my co-founder and I saw is the psychological safety is one of the most important parts as a burnout prevention tool, especially within the workplace. So what this forum theater does is it builds trust within the team, because it's much better than doing the whole catch me when I'm falling stuff. it gets you into the mode of actually doing stuff within the work context that actually happens, so that when this happens in real life, which it always does, then they have something to actually fall back on and see a different approach. And then the idea is, if it's a program, we can come back and say, okay, what went well? Even better if, so that's how we end up doing it. So it all started from us having this conflict between how we saw our approach, but it actually turned out into something that I think is going to be really important for us, having a research element of our offerings, so that we can say you are going to be part of this revolutionary thing.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's uncool.
Yes,
find it very difficult to procure the list.
And I like the avenue you went down there and talking about complementary skill sets as well.
yeah,
When I think about my co-founder, people talk a lot about having a 10x engineer or an outlier engineer, but this guy is operating at a completely different level.
wow.
He's working on AI, getting that into Amazon Prime, spent time with Google. This is the kind of guy who, as a teenager, was building and programming robots just for fun. this is the kind of level that he was operating at. This is the kind of level I'm talking about. And for me, I knew that my co-founder had to be a really 0.1% top world-class engineer. And people kind of say, you'd be better off just having an only technical or super high technical team only. The way I think about it is slightly different. I kind of think if you want everyone to be top 0.1% in their field. So if I'm on that, BD go-to-market side of, building up the list, building up the outreach, and really just being a top-class go-to-market engineer, effectively, and go-to-market operator. Also being a top 0.1% engineer and a software developer and CTO. If I think of the Venn diagram of those two things, I mean, it's possible, but it's unlikely, right?
Right.
If I think in the world, maybe you have to start chatting to a man like Elon. At this point, maybe really someone who's really genuinely top 0.1% at both on the tech and engineering and the go-to-market side.
Yeah.
So really, for me, I knew that in order to rebuild a truly world-class team, it was going to have to be probably a couple people to start with. Me on that BD side, and finding someone of that ilk and that caliber on the tech side. And yeah, for us, I couldn't be happier that we went down that route, to be honest.
And you're also people, right? So you can have someone who's 0.1% who doesn't get along. Right? And I think that's... Because I was saying you're also people. And so there's also the idea about personalities. Can these people work together? One of the things I found which is really interesting is that a lot of people are asked, when I ask about what's challenging about their work, it's not necessarily the work, it's the people. So you can have people who are exceptional at what they do, but if you can't get a team to work together, as in personalities, can they trust each other? Can they do that? Then it doesn't matter how good they are, it still crumbles. So there's also that element, which might be the third circle of the Venn. What is the culture? And that's something that can be worked towards as well, because then you have the three-pronged approach. You've got that tech, you've got the go-to-market, and you've got the fact that they actually like each other, right? And so they would actually bend over backwards for each other. I always give the analogy of I haven't seen a postman like that in a long time. Hey, throwbacks. Why do I keep losing my train of thought? What was I just saying?
We're talking about culture.
Venn diagram.
Culture.
Okay, yes. So the analogy often used about that is because people talked about interdependence. So that's the stage after independence, right? Interdependence being having individual people excellent at their field, but they can rely on each other. So the analogy I give is a F1 pit stop crew, right? If you see everyone's got the smallest job, quote unquote, but they're able to do it at such precision because they know the next person is going to be doing their job at their position as well. And they get together as a unit. And I think part of when it comes to stress, as an organizational stress, is when that unit breaks down. And so it can start off with something as simple as this person wasn't doing what he was meant to be doing. And I was relying on that to be the case. And now I don't feel safe because I feel like I can't rely on the person next to me to be there when it matters, right? It might look like it might look like the pressures are happening and I don't feel I can speak to this person and tell them what's really going on because I'll be judged. It might look like I can't share the fact that I've got this challenge because I might lose my job if I don't meet this deadline or anything in time. And so it ends up being a situation where slowly but surely these things start building up until the point where it starts building up until the point where small cracks become big ones.
Yeah, it's it's encouraging me to think about my own co-founder relationship as well. I think for the way because we've known each other for years, so we've known each other for years. We've been working together for years now as well. And I think as I said, I think there's a correlative relationship between the quality and the trust.
Yes.
So because I know, as I said, he's a 10x 0.1% engineer. I talked about some of those experiences, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it was, Google, Amazon, building robots. The guy's genius. And of course, that alone in itself inspires a certain level of trust. I think I operate at a high level of intensity myself, and I know because he's been in those kind of environments and because he wants to succeed that because I know that we're of the same ilk and the same cloth, cut from the same cloth in that way, that when I'm driving a certain level of excellence or a certain standard, or I'm obsessing over a particular detail that I know is going to be critical for a customer, I know that he's going to get it and he's going to implement it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that I always deliver it in the perfect way. And of course, part of being a CEO, part of being a leader of any team is being able to communicate in a way that inspires. It inspires action, it inspires quick action and effective action. And so knowing that he is of a similar motivation is a big part of that. And I don't think we could work together if I would be having to question, is this person as driven as me, or are they as motivated as I am? I don't think we can work together.
Yeah.
I think where part of my success factor for me is, can I inspire action that will take us to a new place, to build a world-class product, to give our customer a world-class experience. Yeah. And that is often just the accumulation of really fine details. Really, really fine details. So that's what I found so far, over the last, year, couple of years. you obsess over the slight UI placement or the latency or things that in other places might be deemed good enough, but they're not good enough, and that's really, I think, been the foundation of being able to build that trust. He knows that if I am, being critical, that it's not that it's personal or that I don't like him and I can say directly, I speak directly as it is, but I can say directly, I don't think that's good enough.
Yeah.
And then we can start problem solving how to improve it together. And it's bi-directional as well. I know that in times if I haven't executed in a way or a level of accountability that I've said that I'm going to uphold, then I expect that same level of constructive call out.
Yeah.
And that's what helps us to just keep pushing each other forward, keep just elevating the levels.
Yeah.
So
I think what you said there was so important about it not being taken personally, because that can be a breakdown of trust and connection as well within a team. And often it's not necessarily what it said, it's how it said it. It's also...
Yeah, my missus always says that.
Yeah, right? It's not what you said, it's how you said it, right? But it's also what was meant. So I took a course on communication a few years back, and it was phenomenal, but it was 13 weeks. And only halfway through did we actually get to the point about speaking to somebody else, because the first half of it was actually understanding what we need, what we want to say for ourselves before we get to the point of even saying anything. And I think that often there's a gap between what is said and what is meant. And that can be often the cause of a lot of tension within teams, which is why we need the training to be able to say exactly what we mean. So that, what is the actual fear here? What is the pain? What is the challenge that we're actually experiencing? And instead of talking about this thing which is related to it, but seems present and immediate now, but the root cause of it is what we actually need to address. And that takes vulnerability sometimes. And says, actually, we're talking about potential growth of the business, but I'm actually not worried. I'm worried because I don't know if we can maintain this rate of scale, right? Because I'm already stressed. Or we're going through a merger and it's going to be a bigger company and all this other stuff, but is my job at risk, right? Or, okay, cool, we have this other person that we're bringing because there was this need that we need, but will they like me? Or, they tend to be quite brash in the way they speak. It's really direct, and I don't feel the empathy in it. And that's a trigger for me. I don't like being told what to do. I prefer to be asked. All these things might be different ways. One of the things that's interesting on the What a Relief podcast, one of the guests was talking about how, in terms of communication, he'll be able to know if this is a now problem or not a now problem by who's asking it. Little things like that, knowing your team. So when they say something or do something, you realize, actually, this isn't a reflection of me. This is the way they're communicating whatever need or desire they may have. And ultimately, all of this is about the product or the customer. It's not about us.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So we got to frame this around the situations. What is the best for them? No matter how it was said, it's right. That's the other thing that often happens. Someone might say, oh, someone said that, but were they wrong though? Right? So, okay, so it's not what they were saying that's the problem. It's the delivery. And maybe it's not the delivery, it's how it was received. Maybe you had a bad day that morning. Maybe you had some really bad news and you're sensitive in this moment. Maybe the way it was said was triggering of something that happened in your childhood. And so you're exploding now in the middle of a boardroom, right? All these things can be happening. And as a CEO or as a manager of a team, for example, you've got to be able to handle these conflicts in a way that brings you closer together by resolving them, as opposed to breaks it apart.
Yeah, and I think one of the most underrated skills, I think, of a highly effective leader is that emotional control. Can you lead your own emotions in a way that is going to inspire the rest of your team, no matter what is actually going on outside?
Yeah.
If from my experiences, that's been critical in moments that were more difficult. And I mean, I think just the life of a co-founder can be it can be chaotic at times, right? To be honest. And I think, you know, there's been times where, you know, we've been working on a deal and, you know, let's just talk about when we're in a pilot and potentially part of it hasn't gone to plan. Because, you know, I can think of an example of, even this year, I can think of an example where you're working on a pilot, kind of, you know, enterprise client, start to do some deployment already. And somewhere throughout the way, we eventually figured out what had happened and what had caused the bug. But, you know, eventually a bug slipped through the cracks, got into production, and you're looking at, you know, 10s, 50s, you know, somewhere close to 100 people angry and complaining.
Yeah.
And in those moments, everything feels so life or death, right? Everything
Yes.
feels so critical. And I think having the firstly, the trust to focus solely on the problem, you know, it's not even a me v you thing, just what actually is the problem that we're going to solve together. And yeah, and knowing each other well enough to know how to get each other through that moment. You know, I think we're close enough now that no matter what happens on the outside, we'll still be close and we'll figure it out together. And being able to have trust that will continue is so important. When I think back to that example where we messed up on that bug deployment, because we were able to get together so quickly map out what needed to change in terms of the rollout, in terms to redeploy. That went from even that particular situation, that went from a potentially broken relationship with a customer to a 40K contract, right?
Wow.
So having the trust in your co-founder is everything.
Yeah. And also I think the approach as well, because something you said there was really important, because it's not necessarily, it's like Mum would say, it's not what happens, it's how you come back from it.
Yeah.
100%. That molds you, right? And if you have a challenge that you all come out of exceptionally, it builds even more trust. And I think a lot of the time people are fearful of conflict because of the breakdown, as opposed to focusing on the potential of the reward at the end if they are to solve it together. Because then you'll be able to handle anything. And without having those conversations, though, there's an elephant in the room. You know, and that elephant can just break all the china glasses in the house. You know,
and
like
how
a raging bull.
Yeah, and how do you think about feedback as well? Because one thing I say for me is, and I'm sure my co-founder can attest to this as well, I think because we're we're relatively we're what's that again? One thing I say as well, my co-founder, is that because we're close, I wouldn't even say unfiltered, I still deliver it in a way that is constructive, but I get through feedback quickly. So it's in the moment. I'm not waiting until the end of the week. I'm not waiting until the weekend or our next sync or whatever. Like, in the moment, I'll send the WhatsApp or the Slack and say, actually, I think we should say it like this, or I think we should do it like this, or I think we should.
Right.
Or if we're together in the room, like, just stop there and say, actually, I think this would be better. Because otherwise things accumulate, and then you'd end up, firstly, the thing that wasn't quite right will continue throughout the week, and that will compound. And then you're going to have a separate time reworking what could have been better, marginally. And then you're also going to have like an hour-long feedback session, just catching all these things, which is going to be hard to absorb. So for me, I'm all in the camp of deliver that feedback in the moment, instantly.
Yeah.
It's always going to have the biggest impacts.
And I think it's also knowing where that feedback is coming from in terms of the heart of it. It's because you want to be at your best, because you want to improve. It's because of the customer, right? So when it comes to feedback, like there's this concept of the Johari window, which is a framework I really love, right? What you know about yourself versus what other people know about you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You've got that blind spot of things other people can see that you can't. And so they may be able to say, oh, have you ever noticed that you do this? Or when you have this kind of challenge, you approach it this way. And it raises it to your consciousness so that you can do something about it and improve. So feedback for me is an opportunity for growth, whereas a lot of people see it as criticism. And at that point, you risk losing the potential of that growth, and you risk, losing the potential of the actual company of growth as well.
All right, man. I think we're done, man.
Yeah, man. We're blessed, man. We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, man.
I'm happy with that.
How long were we talking?
Hour and a half.